Bonjour à tous et à tous. Merci beaucoup d'être là. C'est un honneur et un plaisir de recevoir aujourd'hui l'artiste ts'msyen David Robert Boxley et le poète et chansonnier ts'msyen Gavin Hudson pour ce deuxième rendez-vous en ligne du Gákte-Quipo. Ils nous rejoignent tous les deux depuis Metlakatla, en Alaska. Cette rencontre sera modérée par Damien Kunik, conservateur responsable des collections Asie du MEG. Et je suis Lucie Monod, conservatrice-restauratrice au MEG, et j'ai la chance et l'honneur de pouvoir introduire cette rencontre. Pour commencer, je vais vous donner quelques informations techniques. Ma présentation va se faire en français, mais la discussion qui va suivre sera en anglais entre les artistes et Damien. Donc, si vous voulez suivre l'interprétation française de la rencontre, vous pouvez rester sur ce canal. Et sinon, vous pouvez choisir l'interprétation anglaise qui va traduire mon introduction, puis ensuite laisser la place aux artistes. Pour cela, vous pouvez cliquer sur le petit globe en bas de votre fenêtre Zoom qui s'appelle Interprétation. Ensuite, si vous avez des questions, n'hésitez pas à les poser dans le QR qui se trouve dans la barre inférieure de votre fenêtre Zoom. Vous pourrez aussi utiliser ce moyen pour poser des questions aux artistes dans les 10 dernières minutes de la rencontre. Enfin, notre rencontre est en live sur Facebook, sur la page Facebook du MEG, en français. Si vous voulez la suivre en anglais, vous pouvez cliquer dans les commentaires dans le lien qui vous conduira à la rencontre sur Zoom. De même, si vous souhaitez poser des questions aux artistes. Ce deuxième rendez-vous du Gákte-Quipo s'inscrit dans le cadre de l'exposition actuellement présentée à MEG qui s'intitule « Injustice environnementale, alternative autochtone ». Nous vous invitons à venir la voir jusqu'au 21 août 2022. Les artistes invités à participer à ces rendez-vous du Gákte-Quipo sont tous des artistes contemporains autochtones et engagés dont les œuvres sont présentées dans cette exposition. 2 autres rendez-vous auront lieu les 1er mars et 5 avril prochains. Durant les quelques premières minutes de ce rendez-vous, je vais vous présenter les 2 artistes invités. Mais pour donner le contexte, je vais brièvement commencer par introduire l'exposition en images à l'aide d'un petit film. Si je le trouve. Excusez-moi. Désolée pour ce petit problème technique. Voilà. L'exposition Injustice environnementale alternative autochtone s'appuie sur 2 constats. Premier, les peuples autochtones représentent 6% de la population mondiale. Et pour nombre d'entre eux, le changement climatique est plus que jamais une réalité. Ils partagent des préoccupations communes concernant la reconnaissance de leurs droits collectifs. Un deuxième constat, les faits démontrent que lorsqu'ils possèdent et contrôlent leurs terres, l'environnement et la biodiversité sont mieux protégés. Beaucoup d'entre eux partagent une éthique du soin et de la réparation, qui est mise en œuvre au quotidien, non seulement pour réparer des objets, mais aussi et surtout pour prendre soin des rivières, des forêts, des océans. Les savoirs et savoir-faire mobilisés qui sont continuellement renouvelés englobent entre autres la langue, la connaissance des plantes et la spiritualité. Humains et non-humains ont des responsabilités réciproques les uns envers les autres. Dans cette optique relationnelle, un saumon, une rivière, un arbre ou une montagne sont des partenaires animés. Les peuples autochtones revendiquent l'important rôle qu'ils peuvent jouer dans la recherche alternative afin de protéger les ressources naturelles pour les générations futures. Lorsque les équilibres ne sont plus maintenus, c'est la crise qui s'installe. La destruction continue des sols et les émissions causées par l'exploitation non durable des ressources accélèrent la crise climatique, qui, à son tour, accélère la dégradation des terres. De nombreux peuples autochtones affirment vivre toujours dans une relation de type colonial avec les États dans lesquels ils se trouvent. Sans les avoir consultés préalablement, ni avoir obtenu leur consentement, ces États donnent souvent la priorité à des activités de développement économique, telles que l'exploitation minière ou des projets hydroélectriques sur des terres traditionnellement occupées par des peuples autochtones. C'est sur un temps de la rencontre que se termine l'exposition en invitant le public à voir, à entendre et à écouter des témoignages d'experts et d'artistes autochtones. Et pourquoi pas, à choisir de devenir actrices et acteurs de changement, en prenant position et en s'alliant, s'ils le souhaitent, aux peuples autochtones pour tisser un avenir commun, fondé sur les valeurs du soin, de la réparation et de la responsabilité à l'égard de toutes les formes du vivant. C'est aussi un moment de rencontre auquel nous vous invitons maintenant. La rencontre de deux artistes, ts'msyen, qui sont invités à partager sur leur travail collaboratif dans le cadre de cette exposition, sur l'importance de la transmission dans la revitalisation des connaissances et sur le lien entre leurs activités artistiques et les enjeux environnementaux actuels. Les deux artistes qui nous reçoivent en fait chez eux aujourd'hui sont Robert Boxley et Gavin Hudson. Ils sont tous les deux ts'msyen. L'un est artiste-sculpteur, l'autre est poète, traducteur et chansonnier. Ils ont collaboré ensemble à la création et à la réalisation d'une installation majeure de l'exposition Injustice environnementale alternative autochtone qui s'intitule Le prince enlevé par le saumon. Cette installation porte le nom d'un conte ts'msyen qui raconte les relations de responsabilité réciproque entre humains et non-humains. Gavin et David sont tous les deux originaires de Metlakatla, où ils vivent actuellement. Metlakatla se trouve sur l'île Annette, dans le sud-ouest de l'Alaska. La communauté ts'msyen de Metlakatla est intimement liée aux peuples autochtones de la côte pacifique, du nord du Canada et du sud de l'Alaska. C'est à Metlakatla qu'ils ont créé en 2015 la fondation Hayak, avec l'artiste vanière Candy McGilton. La mission de cette association à but non lucratif est de préserver, promouvoir et revitaliser le smalyak, la langue des ts'msyen, avec l'aide et l'appui d'aînés et d'aînés, derniers locuteurs courants de cette langue en danger de disparition. Pour l'installation du prince enlevé par le saumon, Gavin Hudson a réinterprété ce conte à 4 voix. La voix de la rivière, la voix du cèdre, la voix du chef des saumons et la voix du prince. Chaque voix raconte sa vision de l'histoire de l'enfant enlevé par le chef des saumons et qui, pendant 5 ans, va apprendre à respecter le peuple des saumons pour que les forêts, les rivières, les poissons et les humains puissent vivre en harmonie. Cette histoire évoque la relation qu'entretiennent les ts'msyen avec les saumons et plus largement, elle nous rappelle à tous notre responsabilité envers les ressources naturelles. Avec le concours de Teresa Lowther, de David Robert Boxley et de Candy McGilton, les 4 versions du conte ont été traduites et enregistrées en smalyak, la langue du peuple ts'msyen. Et pour personnifier ces 4 voix, 4 masques ont été superbement sculptés et peints par David Robert Boxley. C'est ce travail collaboratif que David et Gavin seront invités à parler dans un instant, mais encore quelques mots sur leurs autres créations dans le cadre de cette exposition. Gavin Hudson a écrit un magnifique poème intitulé La grande tapisserie du cèdre, dans lequel il évoque les relations de réciprocité entre humains et non-humains. Il y fait aussi Il parle aussi des conséquences dramatiques de la colonisation en Amérique du Nord pour les peuples autochtones. Et dans ce poème, il appelle à revoir notre rapport au monde afin d'affronter ensemble la crise environnementale et climatique actuelle. Gavin Hudson a aussi composé une très belle chanson, All of One Heart, Nous ne formons qu'un seul cœur, que nous vous invitons à venir écouter dans l'exposition. Cette chanson accompagne le masque de la métamorphose du saumon, sculpté par Robert Boxley. David a commencé à sculpter à l'âge de 6 ans sous la direction de son père, le maître sculpteur David Albert Boxley, et il l'a accompagné lors de nombreux voyages aux États-Unis pour élever des totems. Il s'est aussi formé auprès du célèbre sculpteur Haida, Robert Davidson. David Robert et son père dirigent un groupe de danse, les Gyibaawm, le peuple des saumons, qui se produit chaque année dans toute l'Amérique du Nord. Ce masque à 2 visages représente le saumon lorsqu'il est fermé et révèle un visage humain lorsqu'il s'ouvre. Les masques de la métamorphose sont portés lors de danses traditionnelles, telles que les potlatches, pour représenter un acte de transformation d'un statut à un autre. Le porteur peut ouvrir le masque en tirant sur les ficelles pour révéler l'être intérieur. Un dernier mot pour expliquer le nom de ces rendez-vous, les Gákte-Quipo. Virtuellement, ces rendez-vous prennent place sous le Gákte-Quipo, qui est une œuvre collaborative de l'artiste sami Mareta Nessara et de l'artiste chilienne Cecilia Vicuña, qui se trouve dans la dernière partie de l'exposition. Cette œuvre est inspirée des quipu andins et elle est réalisée à l'aide de Gákte, des vestes mi-longues traditionnelles sami. Cette installation a été complétée en 2021 par des vêtements traditionnels des peuples autochtones de Sabah, en Malaisie, et par une œuvre de l'artiste ts'msyen Candy McGilton. Tout comme cette œuvre relie les histoires des luttes autochtones à travers le monde, c'est aussi un moment de rencontre et d'échange auquel nous vous invitons maintenant avec les artistes invités aujourd'hui. Je vais maintenant laisser la parole à David, Gavin et Damien. Je vous rappelle que si vous voulez poser des questions, vous pouvez le faire dans le système de questions-réponses qui se trouve dans la barre inférieure de votre fenêtre Zoom. Si vous nous suivez sur Facebook, mais que vous voulez suivre la rencontre en anglais ou poser des questions, il vous faudra rejoindre la rencontre sur Zoom à l'aide du lien dans les commentaires. Je laisse la place à nos invités.
So, hello Gavin, hello David. Thank you so much for being here tonight. Swiss time, it's early morning on your side of the globe. So thank you so much for being here. Lucy just introduced the installation, the prints taken by the salmon. Could you introduce in your own words the installation you created for the exhibition?
Good. First of all, good evening, and very happy to be here with you. I'm going to let Gavin go first on this question.
Okay, so I wasn't prepared for that. The exhibition that we contribute, the part of the exhibition that we contributed was demonstrating the interconnectedness of our world and the important role that each of us plays in maintaining that that woven together, what I call the Great Cedar Tapestry, and different aspects of that one reality, different aspects are reflected within our contributions. Mine was a story based on a traditional story of prints taken by the salmon, and for the purposes of this exhibit, I broke it up into 4 perspectives, and that we can get into that a little more later. But to me, the exhibition is a last chance of the world our Mother Earth calling out for one more warning that the world is beginning to destabilize, that the Great Cedar Tapestry is being pulled apart, and it's our actions that are doing it. And that colonialism, colonization, imperialism, capitalism, these human behaviors are not only changing the global climate, but those actions also commit terrible injustices upon indigenous peoples from around the world. And if we can go back to living in a way that's sustainable and respectful and honoring the interconnectedness of our world, if we can learn the lessons from indigenous peoples from around the world who have been living in their traditional lands for thousands and thousands of years, their voices, their traditional knowledge, their worldview, their spirituality, have all those things have allowed our peoples to exist in our respective parts of the world for since time immemorial. So from that perspective, the indigenous peoples are could be teachers on how to address the global climate emergency.
That's why I wanted him to go first. That was an excellent answer. I see it as simultaneously that plea to the world to pay attention, but also.
Now, David, can you hear us?
Am I coming through? Also, was an opportunity for us to contribute something that showed who we still are as Indigenous people. Colonization was very impactful on our people, our village in particular, and having the opportunity to say what we need to say about what's going on in the world, while at the same time showing who we still are, was very important to us, on top of everything that Gavin said. So it's an honor to represent our people on the other side of the world, but also to aid in the message of the exhibit, which is we're running out of time, and that there are perspectives and other ways to do things than maybe what the people in power are trying to do or not doing well enough.
Okay, thank you very much. To be honest, I was about to ask you about the meaning of the installation outside of the context of the exhibition, but you've explained that extremely clearly. So I'll rephrase my question now. Would you, because the message you give us here is might be obvious for you. Would you consider that it? Do you have what's your opinion on how people receive that message in Geneva? How would you consider the meaning of the installation inside the exhibition then? Would it be teaching material? Would it be something else?
I see, well, the entire exhibit, but our part in particular is a moment where people, because I'm sure our culture is so unknown to most of the museum visitors in Geneva, that it's a forced educational moment. If you want to understand our our installation, you have to pay attention to what's being said. You have to really allow yourself to take it in. And I think that's a wonderful analogy for the climate crisis in general, is that one of the reasons it hasn't gained traction is because people actually have to pay attention and learn what's going on. And in this modern world with our phones leading us around, sometimes it's hard to stop for a moment and just pay attention to what's right in front of us. But I think that's also comes from our culture, is, you know, in the old days, sitting around the fire in our houses and listening to these stories was how you had to live. You had to sit and listen and pay attention and remember what you've learned. So I see our contribution as again, it's a real taste of our culture, and I hope the visitors are doing that with every part of the exhibit, that they're really paying attention, because that's what we need.
I think that the only way that we've arrived at the place where we are as a species and the impact we're having upon the world, that we've known for decades and decades that CO2 emissions and pollution and these things are destroying our world. We've known those things. The science has been there for a long time, and we know it now. We can see the accumulating effects of climate change and erratic weather, more extreme weather, more powerful storms, longer droughts, longer fire seasons, more flooding. These events are right in our face. And we know what's happening as a species, but we're still not doing enough to change our ways, and certainly not fast enough. So it's not a question in my mind of whether or not we know what to do. It's not a question of knowing. It's a question of feeling, because feelings are so powerful. And one of the ways that you can change someone's heart is to get them to feel something else, something deeper. And I believe that art in all its forms, painting, carving, weaving, storytelling, poetry, all these forms of expression kind of bypass the logical mind and get to a deeper level in your heart and in your spirit. Because I think if we're ever going to win this thing, if we're ever going to change our ways, then we need to change our hearts as well as our minds. And so I think that we've put a lot of effort into doing both of those simultaneously. Some of it's very overt and stated very plainly, and some of it's very subtle and needs to be interpreted. And hopefully these are the kinds of things that we can do on our part, our contribution to changing people's hearts and minds. Because again, our ancestors figured these things out a long time ago. Storytelling, songs, crest objects, theatrical mask performances, supernatural reenactments, all these things impart knowledge from one generation to the next. And they can do it in a way that isn't a recitation of facts and like an encyclopedia article. That's the best way to learn is to engage all of our senses and on multiple levels at the same time. So I think that what we've tried to do is appropriate for all ages in terms of human age, but all ages in terms of ancient times, modern times, and future times, because it's all interconnected.
Thank you very much. You so speaking about you just talked about your ancestors. You made the link between the installation and environmental issues very clear. How would you describe the art piece in terms of indigenous heritage, indigenous struggles in particular? Do you feel that it resonates with indigenous struggles, the installation do?
In my lifetime, we have reclaimed our culture. Our missionary and government policy made it so that my grandmother and her brothers were punished in school for speaking our language. Our parents' generation were raised in a time where the only hints of our culture that were around were their grandparents speaking our language and the gathering of traditional foods, maybe some random art here and there. But so one of the things about the exhibit that I love is that we're able to make commentary on what's going on in the world with our culture and the understanding that we've regained in our lifetimes. And it's just like all indigenous cultures, there's this strength and I think power that comes with that reclamation, that we weren't stomped out, and that the power of our history and meaning behind what we do artistically isn't gone, and that we can still express ourselves in that ancient way. I think that means a lot to us personally, but I also feel like it really, after walking through the exhibit, fits in with all of the other indigenous contributions to the show. And while there are modern aspects to how we went about it, like the story being divided up into 4 perspectives, or the colors of acrylic paint that I've used on the masks, that those masks, the stories, would fit into our longhouses 500 years ago. And those digital screens that tell the stories will help take them forward into the future. I think it's a perfect example of where we are as Indigenous people today.
There's another aspect, Damien, of what you're touching on. The other thing that we inherited from our ancestors was our language. There's a lot of aspects of who we are that are invisible, that until recently, until our work with you folks, has been a difficult part of who we are to capture and reflect in a museum. Our voice, our language, our philosophy and spirituality. So, when you see David's amazing sculpture work and formline work, that formline is an expression of how our ancestors saw the world. But now with the multimedia experience that you folks have set up with us at the MAG, we're able to make some of those more invisible parts more accessible to people who may not have otherwise had an opportunity to experience that. But that quality of being invisible is really similar to the problems around the world. Our language is endangered. There's not very many fluent speakers left. That's a direct result of colonization. So when we talk about climate, you can't, look out the window and see climate. These things are large scale that are mostly invisible to us. Air pollution and these things are so just as the environment is the stability of it is eroding away, our language is also eroding away, and both are caused by colonization. And so what we've tried to do is express that part of it as well.
Okay, thank you very much for your insight on that very important matter. Maybe we should shift to the present day, and I would love to hear about you telling us how you did collaborate to create the installation. Did it started with sculptures? Did it started with design? Did it started with the story itself?
I feel like it began with we landed on what the story was going to be pretty early. If I recall, it was in the first meeting with the Meg. We brought that up, and it just seemed, it was just an instant, oh, that'd be a great one for this kind of thing. I pretty early on did some sketches after talks with Gavin about how he wanted to portray the story. And then I was able to get carving while he was writing, because I knew what the base, those four masks were going to look like, at least sculpturally. And I held off on painting until I was sure what the stories, how the focus of the stories were going to be. But what was neat about it for me was, is very much like making a mask for our ceremonies, where the mask has to be a character from these oral histories. So in that way, it was normal. I mean, it's just how we do it here at home. And then we also collaborated then on the Somalia afterwards. After Gavin did his wrote the stories, I took a crack at translating them. It's good practice for me. Before we got on Zoom with our fluent speaker and teacher Teresa Lowther to make sure I'd done it well, and she corrected a bunch of things. That was great. But Gavin and I have collaborated on things for years. It's just this is the first time it was for a museum. So it was fun.
One of the very best things about our culture is that no one can do it all on their own. And if you really want to get the full expression, the full experience, it takes lots of people coming together to collaborate. And because everybody has different strengths and everyone has different knowledge and skill and experience. And so the collaboration really, it did start with a story. Well, I think that it originally started with interconnectedness, how the potlatch is interconnected, how our world, the natural world is interconnected, how our culture is interconnected. And And one of the stories that illustrates that very well is the prince taken by the salmon. So that kind of led David and Mai's, that was our guiding light. But I don't want to leave out you folks at the Meg. You were part of that collaboration too. I remember it was a conversation with, I don't remember everybody who was in the room, but it was Candy, David, and I, and Colleen, and maybe both you, Damien and Lucy. I don't recall, but it was a couple of years ago. But that's how we got to the way where maybe there can be an interactive thing where the person is seen through the mask, so that you can become the river, or you can become the forest, or you can become the salmon, or become the prince. And again, it was to get people to experience something different, to look at the situation from a, for us, ancient, but for them, totally new way of looking at the world, but also at looking at themselves, because each of us is part of the world too. So part of the exhibit that you guys created, that I think it was you guys working off of our notes, to create that mirror effect, that emerged completely out of a collaboration between us and you folks. So you guys played a part in it too.
So that was definitely a collaborative effort then. David just dropped the name of Theresa Lothar. So she helped you translate the story in Smalgach, if I pronounce that about correctly. Speaking about transmission of language, transmission of skills, David, you learned carving with your father. Can you tell us, in that context, the importance of transmission, knowledge transmission?
As I mentioned earlier, colonization did a real number on our people, and there were bits and pieces of our culture left. And when my dad got really interested in carving in the late 1970s, his grandmother died in 1980, and he told his grandfather, "I want to put on a potlatch." It's our ceremony. Potlatches are our legal system. They're our banking system. They were how Northwest Coast Native culture functioned. But there hadn't been one in Metlakatla ever, and our people hadn't participated in them since the 1800s because of laws and missionary and other reasons. So my dad had to relearn how to do all this from talking with a few elders who knew some things and from reading books. And my grandfather, actually my dad's grandfather, who raised him, took him out and showed him how to make traditional tools, to find the right angle of branches of trees to make what's called an adze. And how to move logs in the woods, and old traditional knowledge things you could do without power tools and that kind of thing. So there were remnants of that knowledge. My great grandfather was born in 1894, and he lived till I was 10 years old. So I got to be around the language when I was growing up, and sat on my dad's carving shop floor from the time I was a baby. And I started carving when I was 6. So I've been around this all my life, and the language has always been a part of my life and important to us. But I decided a few years ago to really focus on it and try to become fluent. And I've found that the combination of a deeper understanding of our language and that ts'msyen point of view, partnered with everything I learned from my dad and my own study and Robert Davidson, and it has given such a deeper meaning to the art that I make, and my point of view on the world and how things work and how they should work. They have informed that knowledge, that linguistic knowledge, which carries the culture with it. You know, our culture is wrapped up in our language, and that's why it's so important for us to say that. But it has fulfilled me in a way that I didn't anticipate, and has made it so I feel like I can better represent our people, because the things I'm creating aren't coming from just the technical side, but they're now fully partnered with the not just the cultural meaning that I could learn in English, but a point of view of it from our own language that really is so satisfying. And that transmission of knowledge is rare nowadays. There aren't a lot of people who have all of that information to share, and it's why we're having such a hard time with our language. And you know, there are only so few fluent speakers. There are only so many people who have cultural understanding because of what happened to us and the efforts that have been made to bring it back. So that transmission of knowledge and information is so crucial. Not only because what it's saying is important, but because there aren't enough of us who can do it, and there need to be more. And I've spent a good chunk of my life teaching and trying to give that information to my people and to the world. You know, at the same time that we're trying to rebuild our culture, we're also having to be ambassadors for our people all the way in Geneva.
Thank you very much. So you see a definite link between language and technical aspect of carving. There's no boundaries between the two.
Well, and I'm not quite fluent yet, so I'm hoping it will get even more. But yeah, not so much the technical parts, but why it's being created, why it moves that way, why it, you know, why we use them. I have a better understanding of, like, I knew before what you use a mask for. Like I knew that. And it's hard to put into words, actually, but now I understand that on a deeper level, that I know why, I know how my ancestors felt about it, from being able to read old stories that were documented that talk about the use of these things in the old days, and that I could read it in my own language and understand it in my own language, has changed how I look at all of these things.
Thank you very much. And then about you, Gavin, because yeah, seen from the outside, carving is technical. David told us much more about it right now, but seen from the outside as well, writing, you're a self-described writer, poet, singer-songwriter. That's what you told me the first time we met. So that's how you introduced yourself to me. Do you believe your writing skills are related to your heritage?
I think expressing expression through oration and storytelling, organizing our thoughts in a way that can accurately represent who we are, what we're feeling, what we think, has informed my writing for sure. You know, my parents are really good at expressing themselves in very different ways. My mom is an excellent writer, but she's very quiet. My dad isn't so good at writing, but he is an excellent orator, excellent storyteller. And I think those things have informed how I find my way, which is to write in a way that I kind of hear it in my mind. So even though I don't consider myself a great orator, I write or try to write in a way that an orator would deliver it, or the way that I would like to hear it if someone else was telling the story. So that kind of blurring the lines of modern and traditional and ancient, those things kind of converge for me on the page. With a keystroke, I can say a lot. So that's the literal answer to your question. And I guess the deeper one is, I didn't know that I was a poet until this exhibition came along. It brought out of me things that I didn't know were there. I thought I had pretty well understood that I'm a songwriter and a singer, and that I know a lot about our culture and spirituality and philosophy. But I didn't know that I could express all those things and make it all rhyme. That was a discovery that so I think it was the Meg that first called me a poet. But now it's a badge I wear quite proudly. And the poem actually has been, I'm happy to report that it's been published in a magazine in Alaska as well. So I'm a published poet too. Yeah.
Congratulations on that then. But could you, I hope I'm still allowed 3 minutes to
No, you still, I think you're still allowed a few more minutes,
okay.
Damien, because we don't have any question in the chat at the moment. So if the people who are listening to us want to ask questions, don't hesitate to do it in the chat. Otherwise, we leave the floor to Damien, David, and Gavin.
So we are definitely expecting questions from the audience, but they'll chime in time. So speaking about learning and transmission, did you feel like you had a type of formal education in your own heritage, even self-education, or did it just come to you or permeate your life through your community? I mean, either for writing or for carving, you need technical skills, definitely. But how did it come to you? How did that aspect come to you?
I would describe it as all of those things. A lot of it, for me anyway, because of my father, was just because I was around it. Like I don't recall him ever saying, okay, these are the projects we're going to do in order for you to learn this, this, and this. It was, Dad, I want to make this, and hey, let's work on that today. It was never like a formal apprenticeship, but over my upbringing, I guess you could probably call it a more traditional education, more like an old, ancient apprenticeship. But also did a lot of reading on my own. It's been a mix of a lot of different ways of learning, out of necessity, because we didn't have our elders who could teach us our language. Our Gavin and I are old enough that there were a lot of fluent speakers of our language when we were young. But even they had lived in Metlakatla and under the changes the missionary had made. So there are aspects of things like potlatching and more ceremonial aspects of our culture that weren't there to learn from our own people, that we had to go to books and other places to learn. So it was a real combination of those things for me. And that's almost still the position we're in as a people, where there's pockets of knowledge and still a lot of books and things that are helping us. For as much as I wish we didn't have to rely on those things, I'm thankful that someone back in the late 1800s or early 1900s wrote some things down about our people, that in some cases, those are the only ways those aspects of our culture have survived.
When if you asked either of my parents about ts'msyen culture, they would say, well, I don't know anything about the culture. But it was my mom who taught me a sense of community and that we're one people that belong to each other. A lot of those family ties and being a good neighbor and providing for one another, I learned those things from my parents. My dad will tell you in a variety of ways that he doesn't know our culture, but he's been a subsistence hunter and fisherman for his whole life. He knows our lands and waters as well as a PhD person knows their dissertations. And I would consider my dad having a PhD in our lands and waters. It was my dad who taught me that you take only what you need, and to take more than you need is insane. That your mind isn't working right if you take more than you need and cause waste. It was my mom who taught me how to prepare some of our traditional foods. I was raised on our traditional foods. Having a steak or a hamburger was not very common in our house. I grew up on halibut and smoked salmon and deer meat or venison. All kinds of preparations of ooligan grease and seaweed and berries. That was our traditional staples. And I didn't know that we were eating a traditional food. I just thought my parents were really good cooks and we had good food all the time. So a lot of that was infused in me just by being their child and growing up in their house. My dad always talks about Mother Earth. He's the one who taught me that trees literally pull the rain down from the sky. And that the trees create clouds, that the trees create the rain. These lessons that I grew up with are now reflected in the natural sciences and the Western models too. I mean, that trees, like they call it transpiration, creating clouds and then creating rain. So our people knew these things already a long time ago, before scientists ever could verify any of that stuff. And then there's our teachers that were in more formal education, Mrs. Sarah Booth, Gyibaawm Laxha. Her name means heart of the eagle's nest. She taught in our school system here for 13 years, teaching our language. The first words that I was learning in our language came from her when I was in, kindergarten. And all through those first years of school, I saw her every day. We have other teachers that have taught us, Arnold Booth. We still learn from the materials that Arnold and his wife, Mary Booth, who was Sarah's sister, actually. We still learn from the materials that they created in the 70s and 80s. Samoyed Huhuch, Chief Teresa Lowther, teaches us a lot about culture, language, history. And in her mind, she doesn't have to try to connect all these things. They just are all flowing together into one coherent worldview because she was raised in the old way. And we're so fortunate to be able to learn from these people who were so generous of themselves. And they're the ones who taught me the meaning of an elder, that an elder has a lifetime of accumulated knowledge that they're willing to share and eager to share with anyone who wants to learn. To me, that's an elder. They lead by example. And so I hope one day to honor the lessons that they shared with us and follow their example so that when I'm an elder someday, that I can be as generous with the knowledge that I hold. It's because I don't want to be the only one to hold it. It only has power if we share it, because no one can do this on their own. We have to have a sense of community, of brotherhood and sisterhood, of connection to our natural world, of connection to one another, of connection to our descendants who are not born yet, as well as a connection to our ancestors who haven't been with us for a long time. It's all connected, and it takes every part. Every part is important. Every strand in the Great Cedar Tapestry is important. You're important. And everybody watching this broadcast right now, you all have an important role to play in the destiny of our world and of our peoples. These are some of the things that we've learned from our teachers who we've had along the way.
Thank you so much. I'm even more curious now, and I have even more questions to the both of you. I see we have a question from the floor. And so, Lucy, do you allow me to read it?
Yes, of course.
Yeah, okay. So this might be the last question because we are running out of time, but so let me read the question. This is regarding your collaboration with the museum. There are three questions actually. Let's start with the first one. Did the collaboration with the museum change any attitude you had about the museums, in general and their colonial heritage? That's the first question, but that's already pretty broad.
Maybe they kind of go all together. We can read.
Okay. I'm reading the whole of them then. So, question one: Did the collaboration change your attitude towards museums and the colonial heritage of museums? Second question: did it inspire you to collaborate with other museums in the future? And third question: would more accessibility to museums collection help you in a collective goal to save climate, save your cultures?
The short answer to all three of those is yes. I have seen a trend. I've done a lot of work with museums in my life. My dad did a lot of research of our art in museums and took me along with him. So I've done a lot of work in and around museums throughout my life, and I've noticed a trend, especially in the last decade or so, of I think new generations of people running museums and being more open to sharing and understanding their place in history, that there isn't, so, you know, when my dad first started studying, they wouldn't let him touch anything in the collection. They'd move it for him. They'd, you know, and nowadays, most of the time, they just toss us a pair of gloves and we can go in and look at anything we want. So that trend has been happening, but the Meg, to me, took it to a whole new level where we really felt like it was our exhibit too. And especially hearing our language in the exhibit, walking into a room and hearing Somalic in the air in Geneva was an amazing experience. I'm always keen to work with museums because I do take that, as I mentioned earlier, that kind of opportunity to be an ambassador for our people very seriously. And I think the more people understand each other from different parts of the world and different cultures, the better we're all going to be. And yeah, accessibility to museum collections has been totally necessary for us reclaiming our culture. And that's something I hope will continue to expand, that museums will make things easier to see, whether it's, you know, digital photographs or even, you know, 3D renderings of objects that maybe aren't going to be returned. And I hope museums around the world will start, and I believe it has started happening, repatriating things that were taken from around the world and sending them back where they belong. And thank you for the question, Jonathan.
Yeah, I think all three are one large super question with the answer yes. What the Meg has done to me is groundbreaking, transformational. In my mind, the model of my mind of what a museum was a stuffy old institution run by old white men who think they know better than us, and that everything in it was inaccessible. Now, my entire internal mental model of a museum is changed. A museum now, I understand, thanks to you folks, can be an engine for change. It can be a institution that lifts up Indigenous people in present day, rather than talking about us as though we were some figment in the past. We're still here. Our worldview is still relevant. We're still creating and innovating and still willing to reach out and work with others. So absolutely, the collaboration has opened my eyes about what a museum can be, and not only commissioning us for work to be part of an exhibit, but to actually be at the beginning of the conceptual phase of what the exhibit is going to be. That part has been incredibly powerful. That, you know, so that when it was all done and it had opened up and we were walking through the exhibit, it was like, oh, that was the thing that we talked about in that concept meeting a year before. And, you know, there was such a powerful sense of ownership that, you know, as co-owners of the exhibit, that we had such a connection to it. And it was hopefully that powerful sense that we're experiencing was also felt by the other guests who got to witness the museum too, because I just can't applaud this approach and you folks for being so gracious and humble and respectful in working with us and in honoring our point of view and our expertise in the certain areas that we're experts in. It's really filled my heart and changed my mind. And I think that art can do that for everybody.
Thank you so much.
Just to add one more thing, another thing that back to what Gavin was talking about earlier about these invisible things. There are some museums in the world who have recordings and texts of our language that were documented, a century ago, and so those are also things that are out there for us to that we need access to, and we're working on that. But museums, thankfully, have changed from, like what Gavin said about documenting these extinct cultures, the way they used to talk about us, to allowing us to represent ourselves the way we are. And that's a dramatic shift. And I'm very grateful to the Meg for all of that.
Thank you very much for your answers. I'm deeply sorry, but it's already 8 o'clock here in Switzerland. I have to close the session soon. I receive very strong signs in the force that we should stop now. Sorry, the translators are certainly exhausted, the interpreters. Thank you so much for being here. We have so much to talk about, but I'm sure we'll collaborate in the future. And maybe the last words are to Lucy.
Well, I want also to thank you very much. I want also to thank our public, but for your time. And thank you so much, Gavin, and thank you so much, David. It was amazing to hear you tonight, and we're also very grateful for this collaboration with you. It's a very big thing for us as well, and we're learning every day, and it's thanks to you. So thank you very much. And we're going to have 2 more meetings coming up in the next 2 months, on the 1st of March and on the 5th of April. So stay tuned to our Facebook and social media and website. Thank you so much, everyone. And I wish you a very nice day in Metlakatla and a good evening in Switzerland.
Thank you very much. Good evening.
Good evening. Good day.
Bye-bye.
Bye. I think we're still live on Facebook.